You know when your phone starts acting like incredibly sluggish,
Yeah.
taking forever to load, and you think that simply downloading a new productivity app is going to fix everything,
Oh, yeah, totally. We've all been there.
right? But what you actually need is a complete software update for the entire operating system.
Mm.
And I feel like learning a new language is often treated exactly like that app. We assume it's just a new tool, a new vocabulary set we're installing on top of our existing brain.
Yeah, which is a huge misconception.
Exactly. But today, we're looking at material that proves this process is actually a total software update for your brain's entire operating system. Welcome to today's deep dive, everyone.
It's a really profound shift. I mean, we're breaking down how the words you practice speaking externally actually physically rewrite the code of how you process failure internally.
Which is wild to think about.
Yeah, it really is. We are looking at a fascinating session from the English ACE channel, specifically an in-depth discussion featuring their hosts, Mia and Leo. And they do a great job demonstrating that language acquisition is not just about, memorizing syntax or grammar. It's about fundamentally altering your psychological framework.
And the mission for you, the listener, today is to try and look past the grammar. We're exploring the deep psychological link between mastering the English language and developing what psychologists call a growth mindset.
Right. It's so much more than just passing a test.
Exactly. Think of this deep dive as a shortcut to double-duty self-improvement. We're going to examine how the very act of learning to express yourself in a new language can literally rewire your brain to stop fearing mistakes and start turning massive obstacles into actual opportunities.
To understand how this rewiring happens, though, we really have to look at the foundational rules of this new operating system. Mia and Leo lean heavily into a core psychological framework established by Dr. Carol Dweck.
The two mindsets.
Yes, exactly. The concept of the fixed mindset versus the growth mindset.
Right, and let's look at what that actually means in the real world, especially for adults. A fixed mindset operates on the belief that your abilities are static. You're either naturally good at something or you just aren't.
Yeah, it's a very black and white way of seeing yourself.
Totally. It is this psychological trap where a single event becomes your entire identity. So, like if someone with a fixed mindset completely tanks a presentation at work, their internal translation isn't, I failed that presentation.
Right, they don't see it as an isolated event.
Exactly. The translation is, I am not a good public speaker. I am not smart enough.
Which is incredibly restrictive. I mean, a fixed mindset creates a binary world of inherent talent or inherent deficiency. If you believe your intelligence or your capability is a fixed trait, well then, any failure is a permanent indictment of your character.
Wow, yeah, that's heavy.
It is. It naturally leads to giving up because, why try if you lack the fundamental DNA for success? But the alternative, the growth mindset, subverts that entire paradigm. It's the belief that abilities are not carved in stone. They can absolutely improve through targeted effort, persistence, and time.
Which brings us back to the English ACE material. They frame the mind as a gift that could be renewed every single day, but they don't just leave it at vague, positive thinking.
No, they get very practical.
Where they bring in the mechanics, specifically referencing James Clear's concept of tiny habits. They note that if you improve just 1% every day, mathematically, you will be 37 times better after 1 year.
And that specific metric highlights the core engine of the growth mindset, the power of compounding effort. The focus shifts entirely away from making a massive, dramatic overnight change, and it places all the value on taking small, faithful steps consistently.
Okay, so I have to play devil's advocate here for a second. Because improving 37 times over sounds mathematically impressive, sure. But isn't the pressure to always be growing day in and day out exhausting?
That's a fair question.
Like, especially for adults who are already balancing careers and personal lives, it sounds like being trapped on a treadmill of relentless self-improvement. I feel like modern hustle culture has sort of weaponized this idea of constant growth.
That is a very fair critique, and honestly, it's a common misinterpretation of the 1% rule.
Really? How so?
Well, the material specifically differentiates this from hustle culture. It is not about an exhausting, high-pressure overhaul where you work 1% harder to the point of burnout.
Okay, that's a relief.
Right. It's about making a 1% better choice. Think of it like a micro-adjustment to a ship's steering wheel. It doesn't require massive physical strain to turn the wheel just 1 degree, but over a long distance, that 1 degree completely changes your destination.
I like that analogy.
Yeah, you don't have to change everything in one big day. You just have to trust the daily journey.
So, knowing that small steps compound over a year makes sense in theory. But taking that into the real world is messy, you know? How does this practically apply to the intensely vulnerable, often deeply embarrassing process of learning a new language?
It is so vulnerable.
It really is.
Yeah.
Think about the last time you, as a listener, tried to order food on vacation in a foreign country, and you just completely blanked. Your face gets hot, you feel foolish, you spend your whole professional life building up confidence so you don't look silly, and suddenly you sound like a toddler.
That is the exact vulnerability Mia and Leo address in the episode. Language learning strips away adult competence.
Yeah, tumbling.
Definitely. But a growth mindset fundamentally alters how your brain perceives that vulnerability. Instead of seeing that moment at the restaurant as a humiliating failure that diminishes your worth, a growth mindset categorizes that mistake as proof of effort.
Wow, okay.
Yeah, every error is processed as a data point for improvement rather than, a threat to your ego.
And to facilitate that shift, they highlight the power of one tiny, seemingly insignificant word, yet. Or even the phrase, once again.
Oh, yes, the power of yet.
Just 3 letters. Transforming the sentence, I can't speak English, into I can't speak English yet. It completely changes the dynamic.
It really does.
Adding yet to the end of a sentence is like putting a detour sign up in your brain. Instead of hitting a dead end and shutting down the engine, you're forcing your brain to calculate a new route. It instantly connects where you currently are to where you're going.
And if we look at the underlying cognitive behavioral psychology.
Wait, let's pause and unpack cognitive behavioral psychology.
Yeah.
That sounds like textbook jargon.
Fair enough, fair enough.
What is that actually doing in my head when I add the word yet?
Okay, so cognitive behavioral psychology is basically the study of how your thoughts, your feelings, and your actions are all linked in a continuous loop.
Yep.
If you think a negative thought, like I can't do this, your brain releases stress hormones, you feel defeated, and your action is to quit. That is a closed loop.
Makes sense.
The word yet, or phrasing things as let's try once again, physically interrupts that specific neural pathway. Saying I can't do it signals a permanent state. I can't do it yet signals a temporary challenge.
Oh, I see.
It literally changes the brain's orientation from a threat response to a problem-solving state.
That makes the next example from the English ACE session so much clearer. They discuss reframing internal dialogue during listening practice.
Right.
If you're listening to a native speaker talking a mile a minute, the natural reaction is to stress out and think, this is too fast, I don't understand. Which, based on what you just said, triggers that threat response and floods the brain with panic.
Precisely. And that panic actually blocks your ability to process the auditory information.
But the suggested reframe is to tell yourself, this is a good challenge for my ears, and I am learning new sounds today.
Which is such a powerful shift.
It is. You are intentionally bypassing that fight or flight response. You're taking the exact same external stimuli, the fast speech, but changing the internal code so you feel like a champion stepping into an arena rather than a victim of a rapid-fire conversation.
The underlying mechanism here is that we must talk to ourselves the way we would talk to a dear friend.
Yeah, we are always so much harder on ourselves.
We really are. When a friend is struggling to learn something new, we don't berate them or tell them they are inherently flawed. We offer patience. By directing that same compassion inward, you remove the heavy cognitive load of self-criticism.
That makes so much sense.
Your brain literally has more free energy to dedicate to language acquisition when it isn't wasting energy defending your ego.
Which brings up an interesting dilemma. Once you embrace this vulnerability internally, how do you actually communicate it externally? Especially in a professional environment where you still need to project confidence.
Right. You can't always just say, oops, my bad.
Exactly. You need the actual vocabulary to express that your mind is changing. Mia and Leo spend time breaking down the vocabulary flexibility, comparing casual and formal ways to express a shift in thought.
They provide very specific linguistic tools for this. They start with the informal phrase, I changed my mind.
Which is perfectly fine for casual situations. You decide you want tea instead of coffee, it's breezy, no big deal.
Right.
But then they contrast this with a professional setting. The suggested formal phrase is, I have reconsidered my position. Like after looking at the new data, I have reconsidered my position on the project timeline.
It sounds very polished.
It does, but I have to ask, doesn't a fancy phrase like reconsidering my position just sound like corporate speak to cover up the fact that you were wrong? Like, is it just a shield for the ego?
It might seem that way on the surface, but it's actually about precision and maintaining professional agency.
How do you mean?
Well, saying I was wrong implies a moral or absolute failure. Saying I have reconsidered my position indicates that a deliberate, analytical process took place. It signals executive function. It shows that you evaluated new evidence and adapted accordingly. Having these different variations allows the learner to express a shift in perspective while actively demonstrating competence. It frames adaptability as a leadership strength rather than a weakness.
Okay, I see the distinction. It turns a potential moment of weakness into a demonstration of analytical thinking. And they do the same thing with expressing a fresh start.
Yes, they do.
The informal phrase is simply, I want to start over. You mess up a drawing, you scrap the paper, you begin again.
But the more formal, or perhaps more poetic, alternative they offer is to turn over a new leaf.
I really appreciate the imagery they attach to this. It's likened to a beautiful tree in the spring. It refers to changing your behavior for a fresh, positive start, like deciding to build a new morning routine.
It's very evocative.
Yeah, it implies organic growth and renewal rather than just erasing a mistake.
And knowing these precise phrases gives you the tools to articulate your growth, but, we have to address the reality of application. Having an optimistic vocabulary does not make you immune to the friction of daily life. How do we maintain this growth mindset when life gets genuinely overwhelming, or when the stress feels too heavy for a simple reframe?
That is where the material pivots to specific daily tools for resilience. They introduce the phrase, look on the bright side.
Which can sound cliché.
It does sound cliché, but they ground it in an active practice of gratitude. If it's pouring rain and ruining your outdoor plans, you actively look on the bright side and say, well, at least the garden is getting water. They describe gratitude as a superpower for our emotions that rewrites our mindset.
And the reason they call it a superpower is deeply rooted in how our nervous system operates. Biologically, you cannot hold a state of deep gratitude and a state of intense, paralyzing anxiety simultaneously.
Really? I didn't know that.
Yeah, they utilize different neural networks, but they're also practical. They know that sometimes in the heat of a stressful moment, gratitude feels impossible.
Totally. When I'm stressed, the last thing I want to do is list what I'm thankful for.
Exactly. So for those moments, they provide a specific circuit breaker. The strategy to pause and reflect.
Right. The steps for this are highly physical. Stop talking, take a deep breath, and remember good things.
Yeah.
You mentioned the autonomic stress response earlier. Are we talking about hitting the brakes on that fight or flight mode?
Exactly. When you're stressed, your amygdala, which is the brain's threat detector, hijacks your entire system.
Right.
By stopping your speech and taking a deliberate deep breath, you're sending a physiological signal via the vagus nerve to your brain that you are safe.
Oh, wow.
You're literally overriding the chemical dump of anxiety before it cascades. And once you've disrupted that panic, they introduce the phrase, shift your focus.
Right, because if you're paralyzed by worrying about the distant future or massive goals, you consciously shift your focus to the present moment, to the very next microscopic step where you can actually take action.
Which leads directly into their definition of resilience.
And this is where I think the material really shines, because they define resilience beautifully.
Yeah.
It's the ability to bounce back like a dropped rubber ball.
I love that visual.
Me too. You absorb the impact and you bounce back up. But they're very careful to clarify what a good mindset actually is. It is not toxic positivity. It doesn't mean hiding your tears or pretending you are never angry or sad.
That is a critical distinction. Toxic positivity demands the suppression of negative emotion, which we know is psychologically damaging.
Right.
A true growth mindset accepts the sadness. Mia and Leo compare it to a storm. You accept that you're in the storm, you feel the rain, but you don't live there forever because you know the sun is still behind the clouds.
That's a great way to put it.
Resilience isn't about ignoring the impact. It's about feeling the emotion, but maintaining the fundamental belief that improvement is inevitable.
To put all this theory into practice, Mia and Leo play this reframing game that I found fascinating. One of them gives a common negative phrase, and the other has to rewrite it into a positive mindset phrase in real time.
Yeah, this was a great exercise.
For instance, transforming the thought, I am terrible at public speaking. I always get too nervous.
And the reframed version is, public speaking is an opportunity for me to share my ideas, and I am learning to manage my energy.
Which is brilliant.
Notice the linguistic shift there. It takes the physical sensation of nervousness, the elevated heart rate, the sweating, and neutralizes the fear by relabeling it as energy that simply needs to be managed.
It completely defangs the anxiety. Here's another one. Changing the classic excuse, I don't have enough time to exercise. My life is too busy.
We hear that one all the time.
Constantly. The reframe becomes, I can find 10 minutes today to take care of my health because my body is important. Again, it shifts the focus from the massive, overwhelming obstacle of having zero free time to the tiny, actionable 1% habit, finding just 10 minutes.
What this game effectively demonstrates is that your internal monologue dictates your external reality. The words you use inside your head are the most important words you hear all day.
Wow, yeah.
To ensure those internal words are the right ones, the English ACE session concludes by detailing 3 specific daily routines to build these neural pathways.
Yes, the daily habits. The first one is a morning routine, sitting quietly for just 5 minutes before looking at a screen and saying thank you for 3 simple things.
Just 3 things.
Right, a warm cup of coffee, the sound of the birds, a good night of sleep. It primes the brain for abundance instead of rushing straight into a deficit of stress.
And the second routine involves looking in the mirror and making a positive, out-loud declaration.
Police one.
Yes. For example, explicitly saying to your reflection, today is going to be a productive and joyful day.
Okay, I'm going to be honest.
Okay.
If you tell me to look in the mirror and give myself a pep talk in a second language, I am going to cringe. It feels so artificial, almost like, self-help fluff.
Oh, I totally get why it feels that way.
Does the science actually back this up, or is this just to make us feel warm and fuzzy?
No, it's deeply rooted in neuroplasticity. Thinking a positive thought is good, but when you speak it out loud, you engage entirely different parts of your brain.
Oh, really?
Yeah, exactly. You engage the motor cortex to form the words, and crucially, you engage the auditory cortex as you hear your own voice. Hearing your own voice physically speak a positive declaration creates a much stronger, faster neural feedback loop than just thinking it silently.
That is fascinating.
The physical vibration of speech matters to memory encoding. So yes, it feels silly at first, but as Mia and Leo point out, sometimes we need to laugh at ourselves.
Lovely.
That laughter itself releases dopamine, further cementing the positive association with the language.
Okay, when you explain the mechanics of the auditory feedback loop, it makes total sense. You're literally manufacturing the sound of your own success.
Exactly.
And the final routine they suggest is for the end of the day, right before sleep. You think of one small victory from your day. Even if the day was an absolute disaster, you find one good thing, like having a nice conversation, or simply finishing a 5-minute study session.
They call this a win-win situation.
Right. You win with your English progress, and you win by actively filling your mind with positive data before your brain consolidates memories during sleep.
By cementing the day with a victory, no matter how small, you're closing the growth mindset loop. You're providing your brain with hard evidence that the 1% improvement actually happened. It ensures that you wake up the next day primed to take the next small, faithful step.
So let's pull all of these threads together. What this deep dive into the English ACE material reveals is that learning English, or any new skill, really is not just an academic requirement.
Not at all.
It's a profound journey toward personal resilience. By practicing phrases like yet, or trying once again, learning to formalize our adaptability with phrases like reconsidering my position and deliberately choosing to look on the bright side, you're not just memorizing syntax.
No, you're doing so much more.
You are literally updating your brain's operating system to see opportunities instead of dead ends. You're learning to absorb the drop of the rubber ball and engineer the bounce back.
The integration of vocabulary and cognitive psychology is entirely seamless here. The language gives you the specific tools to express the mindset, and the mindset gives you the courage to endure the vulnerability of practicing the language. It's a mutually reinforcing engine of growth.
Which leaves us with a final, lingering question for you to explore on your own today. If our inner dialogue physically shapes the neural pathways of our reality as much as we've discussed, how dramatically different would your life look a year from now if you actively chose to only speak to yourself in your second language?
Oh, I love that thought.
Right. What if you deliberately used only the positive, growth-oriented vocabulary you were learning, stripping away all the cynical baggage of your native tongue, and ran entirely on this new, optimistic code? Who could you become?
That is a brilliant thing to reflect on.
Thank you for taking this deep dive with us today. We hope you take these tools, apply them to your own daily routines, and keep finding the profound power in that tiny word, yet.